Lieutenant Volodymyr Kravchenko had served in the Ukrainian army for 6 years before February 2022. 2 tours in the Donbass region, combat experience against separatist forces. He'd seen death, violence, the worst that war could throw at him. When the invasion began and his reconnaissance unit was ordered to establish observation posts in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, he figured it would be just another deployment. Dangerous, sure, but nothing he hadn't handled before. What Volodymyr didn't expect was that the radiation wouldn't be the worst thing they'd encounter in the Red Forest. As told by the soldiers who fought in the most contaminated battlefield on Earth, this is the smoke pit, and these are the true stories of the Red Forest Sentinel. On February 24th, 2022, Russian forces launched their invasion of Ukraine. Among their first objectives was advancing through the Chernobyl exclusion zone. For those who don't know, Chernobyl is the site of the worst nuclear disaster in history. Back in 1986, Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded during a safety test, releasing something like 400 times more radiation than the Hiroshima bomb. The surrounding area became what's called the exclusion zone, about 2,600 square kilometers of land where radiation levels made it basically uninhabitable. The Red Forest got its name because of what happened after the disaster. This forest, just west of the reactor, absorbed so much radiation that the pine trees literally turned red before they died. I mean, bright ginger red. The whole forest. They eventually bulldozed it and buried it. But the ground is still so contaminated that radiation levels in some spots hit 4.7 Roentgen per hour. To put that in perspective, if you're standing there without protection, you'd start getting radiation sickness in about 15 minutes. Dead within hours. For 36 years, almost nobody went there. Nature took over, and weirdly enough, life found a way. Scientists discovered fungi that actually feed on radiation, plants with mutated genetics, animals with higher tolerance. The place became this bizarre experiment in how life adapts to the worst conditions imaginable. Then in 2022, it became a battlefield. Russian commanders figured the Ukrainians wouldn't defend radioactive ground. Made sense, right? Who wants to fight in a place that can kill you just by standing there? Turns out they were wrong. Ukrainian forces deployed reconnaissance teams throughout the zone. Their job was to monitor Russian movements and slow them down however they could. One of those teams was led by Lieutenant Kravchenko, call sign Sentinel 6. Now, the account I'm about to share comes from a Ukrainian intelligence officer. We'll call him Dmytro. He worked as a liaison between forward teams and command during the first months of the invasion. His job was reviewing incident reports, debriefing soldiers, figuring out what information needed to go up the chain. What he found in those reports bothered him a lot. Sentinel 6, this is command. What's your position? Over. Command Sentinel 6. About 2 clicks west of the reactor, Red Forest sector. Setting up the OP now. Over. Roger. Be advised, radiation in your sector is extreme. Don't stay put more than 4 hours. Copy. Yeah, we got dosimeters. Reading 3.8 Roentgen right now. We'll rotate. Over. Good. Report any enemy movement. Command out. Dmytro remembers the first real report from Kravchenko's unit. February 27th, 3 days into the invasion. I knew Volodymyr personally, Dmytro tells us. We trained together at the academy. He wasn't the type to freak out or make things up. So we called in that first report. I could tell something was off. Not fear exactly. More like he couldn't believe what he was reporting. Sentinel 6 had set up in an old concrete building near the Red Forest. Soviet-era maintenance structure, probably. It gave them cover and a decent view of the main road the Russians were using. 8 guys total. 2 snipers, 2 spotters, a medic, comm specialist, demo guy, and Kravchenko. They had thermals, night vision, enough supplies for 48 hours. The radiation was manageable near the building. As long as they didn't go deeper into the forest, they'd be okay. First night went fine. They spotted Russian convoys, called in artillery, delayed the enemy advance. Standard recon work. Second night is when things got weird. Dmytro shared parts of Kravchenko's debriefing with us. Here's what the lieutenant said. Second night, my sniper Andrei was on watch with the thermal scope. Around 0230, he called me over. Said he was seeing something that didn't make sense. I looked through the scope and yeah, I saw it too. Heat signature about 150 meters into the Red Forest. But it was wrong. Normally humans show up bright white or yellow on thermal because we're warmer than the environment. This thing was inverted, darker than the background, like it was colder than the surrounding air. I thought maybe the equipment was glitching, cold affecting the electronics or something. But then it moved, stood up, and that's when we realized the scale was all wrong. This thing was tall, really tall. I'm talking 3 meters, maybe more. Andrei asked if it could be a Russian on some kind of platform. I told him to scan for other signatures. Nothing. This thing was alone, and it was walking deeper into the forest, into an area where we'd measured over 5 Roentgen per hour. Nobody goes there without a radiation suit. Nobody. We watched it for maybe 10 minutes. It moved slowly, methodically, weaving between the dead trees. Then it just stopped. Stood completely still for another 5 minutes, then kept moving until it was out of range. I logged it but didn't report it right away. Honestly thought we'd seen a glitch, or maybe a big animal. Couldn't explain the height though. Third night, they saw it again. This time multiple guys witnessed it. Same time, around 0245. The entity, that's what they started calling it, appeared from deeper in the forest and moved along what looked like a patrol route. Came within 100 meters of their position. The team was ready this time. Every man had his weapon, night vision prepped, thermals running continuously. They'd set up a rotation, so someone was always watching that section of forest. The morale was already deteriorating. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but they all felt it. Something fundamentally wrong was out there. Andrei, the sniper who'd first spotted it, was shaking. Not from cold, from fear. He'd been in firefights, taken enemy fire, watched friends die. But this was different. Lieutenant, he whispered, what if it knows we're watching? Kravchenko didn't have an answer for that. The entity moved with purpose this time. Not wandering, not exploring. It was moving in a deliberate pattern, stopping at specific points, almost like it was checking coordinates. At one point, it stopped near a cluster of dead trees and seemed to examine something on the ground. Bent down, if you could call it bending. The movement was fluid but wrong, like joints working in directions they shouldn't. One of the spotters, Yuri, started recording on his personal phone. The footage was grainy, dark, but you could make out the shape moving between the trees. That footage would later be analyzed by intelligence officers who would have no explanation for what they were seeing. Kravchenko decided to look at it through night vision instead of just thermal. What they saw was disturbing. Through the NVGs, they could make out a shape. Humanoid, walking on 2 legs, but the proportions were off. Limbs too long, torso too thick. One of the spotters said it looked like a person stretched on a rack. It moved with this awkward gait, not quite walking, not quite shambling. Every so often it would stop and tilt its head, like it was listening for something. Here's where it gets worse. The thing had no heat signature on thermal, but it was visible on night vision. It seemed to absorb ambient light rather than reflect it. And when it turned in their direction, several guys swore they saw something that resembled eyes. Not human eyes, just 2 points of reflected light where eyes should be. What scared them most was that it didn't seem bothered by the radiation at all. They were watching this thing move through areas that would kill an unprotected human in under 20 minutes, but it showed no signs of distress, no urgency. It moved like the radiation was its natural habitat. Kravchenko filed an official report this time, marked it as unidentified entity, and asked if Russians had any experimental protective gear that might explain what they were seeing. Response from command was dismissive. Probably a large animal, maybe a moose or bear. Chernobyl has wildlife that came back after humans left, but Kravchenko knew what he'd seen. Bears don't stand 3 meters tall. Fourth night, March 1st, it changed its behavior. Instead of keeping its distance, it came close, very close. Here's Kravchenko again. We were on high alert because of the previous sightings. Every man knew something was out there. Around 0230, our perimeter alarm went off. Motion sensors we'd set up in case Russian infantry tried to sneak up on us. Taras, my demo guy, was positioned on the east side with a suppressed rifle. He had night vision and thermal. He whispered, "Something's here." I moved to his position as quietly as I could. Through the broken window, we saw it, standing about 15 meters away, right at the tree line, facing our building, looking directly at us. I don't know if it could actually see us, or just sensed we were there. Up close, it was even worse. The body was humanoid, but obviously not human. The skin, or whatever it was, looked rough in the night vision, almost crystalline, reflected light weird. The head was too small for the body. No hair we could see, and the way it stood, perfectly still, not swaying, not shifting its weight, just still. Then it tilted its head, like a bird looking at something interesting. Took one step forward. My hand went to my rifle. Taras was already aiming, finger on the trigger, but it didn't come closer. Just stood there for what felt like forever. Probably 2-3 minutes. Then, without warning, it turned and walked back into the forest. Not hurried, not alarmed, just left. We checked our dosimeters immediately. Radiation had spiked while it was near us. Jumped from 3.2 Röntgen to 4.9 during those few minutes. Soon as it left, levels started dropping back down. That's when I realized something terrifying. This thing wasn't just surviving in the radiation. It was carrying radiation with it. So contaminated it was increasing ambient levels wherever it went. Next morning, Kravchenko requested immediate extraction. Their accumulated exposure was getting dangerous, and morale was shot, but extraction wasn't possible. Russian forces had intensified their push, and all helicopters were engaged elsewhere. Sentinel 6 was told to hold position another 48 hours. March 2nd would be their last night in the Red Forest. "Lieutenant, I'm not staying here another night with that thing out there. None of us want to be here, Andrei. But we have orders." "Orders?" "That thing came within 15 meters. What if it decides to come inside next time? We'll deal with that if it happens. Right now we maintain position and continue the mission. With respect, sir, our mission is reconnaissance. How do we even report this? Command thinks we're seeing bears. That was not a bear. I know. I've filed 3 reports. They're being reviewed." "Reviewed? Lieutenant, we need to get out before." "Before what? Before something we can't explain kills us? Look, I'm scared too. We all are. But we're soldiers. We hold this position. That's the job." At 0215 on March 3rd, it appeared again. But this time it wasn't alone. 3 signatures on thermal, all showing the same characteristics. Inverted thermal signatures, extreme height, moving through highly contaminated zones like it was nothing. The 3 entities gathered about 80 meters from the observation post. They seemed to be communicating, not with voices the soldiers could hear. Through movements, they'd face each other, tilt their heads, make gestures with those long limbs. Almost looked like a meeting. After several minutes, 2 moved off in different directions, deeper into the forest. The third one, the one they'd been seeing, approached the building again. This time it didn't stop at 15 meters. It came within 5 meters, close enough they could hear it. The sound wasn't speech, more like a low-frequency hum. Felt more than heard, vibrated in their chests. Several team members reported feeling nauseous, dizzy. One of the snipers started bleeding from his nose. Dosimeter screamed. Over 7 Röntgen per hour. That level causes severe radiation sickness within hours. Kravchenko made a decision. They were leaving, mission be damned. Preparing for emergency extraction, even if they had to walk out on foot. But before they could move, the entity did something that froze them all in place. It raised one arm and pointed. Not at the building, not at them. It pointed north, toward the road where Russian convoys passed. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest. When I got Kravchenko's final report, I flagged it for senior leadership immediately. This wasn't just a weird sighting anymore. Multiple witnesses, multiple encounters, measurable physical effects with the radiation spikes, and what looked like intelligent behavior. The report was classified within hours. Sentinel-6 was extracted and debriefed by a special unit. I was told not to discuss it with anyone. But here's what bothered me. I started reviewing reports from other units in the zone. Found 6 more teams that had filed similar reports. Different locations, different units, same observations. Tall entities, inverted thermal signatures, massive radiation spikes, only appearing at night. 7 different teams, reporting the same thing. Official explanation? Stress-induced hallucinations, combat fatigue, psychological effects of operating in a contaminated environment. But I interviewed these soldiers. Experienced men, rational men. They knew the difference between stress and reality. And there was evidence. Dosimeter data showing the spikes. Thermal imaging footage I personally reviewed. These weren't hallucinations. Something was out there. Not everyone who saw it was military. A civilian contractor, we'll call him Victor, was hired to assess structural damage in the zone. His job was figuring out which buildings could be used for defensive positions. Late March 2022, Victor was escorted into the zone by security to survey buildings near the Red Forest's eastern edge. Here's what he told us. I'd been in the zone before the war, back in 2019, doing similar work. Always an eerie place, but in 2022 it felt different. You could feel the violence in the air. We were examining an old admin building, maybe a kilometer from the forest. The soldiers with me were nervous, kept scanning the tree line. I asked what they were looking for. Said they'd heard rumors about strange things in the forest. Thought they were messing with me. We were inside, 2nd floor, when we heard it. This sounded like nothing I'd ever heard. Low, resonant, made my teeth ache. The soldiers went on high alert immediately. One said, "It's here." I looked out the window toward the forest. Didn't see anything at first. Then realized I was looking too low. This thing was tall enough I had to look up. Standing at the forest edge, maybe 50 meters away. I'm not a soldier. Not trained for this. I panicked. Dropped my equipment, backed away from the window. Soldiers were already moving, pushing me toward the stairs, saying we needed to leave now. As we ran to the vehicle, I glanced back. It hadn't moved. Just standing there, watching us. I remember thinking it looked like a tree at first. Another dead tree in a forest full of them. But trees don't tilt their heads. Trees don't watch you leave. Victor's account is important because he's a civilian. No combat experience. No knowledge of the military reports. But his description matched exactly what soldiers had been reporting. After this, Ukrainian military suspended all civilian access to the Red Forest sector. Official reason was increased Russian activity. Real reason, according to Dmytro, was the growing number of encounters. By April, we had 12 separate incident reports, Dmytro explains. Different units, different times. Always the same area. Always the Red Forest. Command decided whatever was out there. We didn't have resources to deal with it while fighting a war. Area was designated no-go except for critical operations. Physical evidence. But there was more than just eyewitness testimony. Some teams found physical evidence that couldn't easily be explained away. In early March, a Ukrainian patrol discovered what they initially thought was an animal den about 200 meters into the Red Forest. The structure was crude. Fallen logs arranged in a rough semicircle, branches piled in a way that created sheltered space. Nothing unusual about that. Animals build shelters. But the location was what troubled them. Their dosimeters were screaming. Over 6 Rankine per hour. Lethal exposure levels. No animal would voluntarily stay there. No animal could survive there. Inside the shelter, they found markings. Deep scratches in the wood. And patterns that looked almost deliberate. Not random animal claws. These were organized, repeated symbols. One of the soldiers took photographs before they retreated from the area. Those photographs show markings that some analysts later said resembled ancient Slavic runes, though that's probably coincidence. Probably. More disturbing were the tracks they found around the shelter. Footprints, if you could call them that. Elongated, roughly 45 centimeters long. 5 distinct toe impressions, but spaced too wide. The stride length between prints was enormous. nearly 2 meters. Whatever made them was either very tall or taking careful, deliberate steps through terrain it knew intimately. The patrol also reported feeling intensely nauseous the longer they stayed near the shelter. One soldier vomited. Another developed a severe nosebleed. When they checked their dosimeters later, they realized they'd absorbed nearly a full day's safe dose in just 20 minutes at that location. They photographed everything, marked the coordinates, and retreated. A scientific team was supposed to investigate further, but the area came under Russian artillery fire 2 days later. By the time Ukrainian forces secured it again weeks later, the shelter had been destroyed. Whether by artillery or by something else, nobody knows. The photographs remain classified, but Dmytro saw them. "I've seen a lot of strange things in intelligence reports," he tells us. But those markings, those tracks, whatever made them, had been living in that forest for a while. It had claimed territory, and we had just stumbled into it. Testimony, Russian account. Here's where it gets interesting. The encounters weren't limited to Ukrainian forces. Before we get to the journal, there's another Russian account worth mentioning. In late March, a Russian forward operating base near the zone perimeter reported something that got attention even at command level. A Russian lieutenant, whose name was redacted from the captured documents, filed an incident report about hostile unknown forces in the Red Forest sector. The report was clinical, professional, written by someone trying very hard to sound rational while describing something irrational. According to the report, a 4-man patrol had been sent to investigate unusual electromagnetic interference that was affecting their communications. The interference seemed to be emanating from somewhere in the Red Forest. They thought maybe it was Ukrainian jamming equipment. The patrol entered the forest edge at dusk. Within 30 minutes, they reported seeing unidentified tall figures moving between the trees approximately 150 meters ahead. The patrol leader requested permission to engage. Command denied, ordered them to observe and identify. For the next hour, the patrol tracked 3 separate figures through the forest. The figures never attempted to hide or evade. They just moved through the most contaminated areas like they belonged there. The Russians followed at a distance, trying to get a clear visual. Then, according to the report, all 3 figures stopped simultaneously, turned to face the Russian patrol, and just stood there. The patrol leader described what happened next. The figures remained motionless for approximately 5 minutes. During this time, all 4 patrol members experienced severe headaches, nausea, and disorientation. Private Kozlov began vomiting. Sergeant Volkov reported seeing lights that weren't there. I made the decision to withdraw immediately. As they retreated, one of the patrol members looked back. The figures were following them, not running, not hurrying, just walking, but somehow keeping pace with the Russians, who were now moving at a near sprint. The patrol didn't stop until they reached the edge of the forest. When they emerged, their dosimeters told a frightening story. All 4 had been exposed to massive radiation levels, far higher than should have been possible given their location and the brief time they'd spent in the forest. 2 of the men were immediately evacuated for radiation treatment. The Russian command's response to this report? They court-martialed the lieutenant for creating panic and filing false reports. But they also quietly designated the Red Forest as a no-go zone for Russian forces. In April, after Russian forces withdrew from the Chernobyl region, Ukrainian troops found something interesting in an abandoned Russian command post. Among the scattered papers and equipment was a journal belonging to a Russian soldier identified only as Mikhail. Most of the entries were mundane. Complaints about food, boredom, radiation fears. But one entry, dated March 15th, stood out. "We saw something tonight that command will never believe. Our convoy was moving through the exclusion zone, trying to avoid Ukrainian artillery. Around midnight, we took a wrong turn and ended up on a road that led deeper into the contaminated forest. The dosimeter alarms were going crazy. Captain wanted to turn around, but the road was too narrow. We had to keep going until we found a place wide enough to reverse the trucks. That's when we saw it. It was standing in the middle of the road, 3 meters tall, maybe more, just standing there, facing our convoy. In the headlights of the trucks, we could finally see it clearly. The skin wasn't skin at all. It looked almost like bark, rough and cracked, with a strange luminescence to it. Not glowing exactly, but reflecting light in an unnatural way. No one gave an order to fire. No one wanted to be the first to shoot. We just stood there, 30 armed soldiers, staring at this thing in our path. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there. After what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute or two, our commander ordered us back into the vehicles. We would find another route. No one argued. As we reversed and turned around, I looked back. The entity was still standing there, watching us leave. Or at least, that's what it felt like. I couldn't see eyes, couldn't see a face clearly, but I knew it was watching. That was the last time I saw it before we pulled out of the zone. But I'll never forget it. None of us will. We were trained soldiers, heavily armed, in armored vehicles. And we ran. We ran from something that never threatened us, never attacked us, just existed, and that was enough. Mikhail's testimony is significant because it came from a Russian soldier. No contact with Ukrainian forces. No way he could have known about the Ukrainian reports. Yet his description matches exactly what Ukrainian reconnaissance teams had been reporting for weeks. After his unit was captured, Mikhail was questioned extensively about the zone. He confirmed he'd seen the entity at least 3 more times during the Russian occupation, always at night, always in or near the Red Forest. He also revealed that Russian command had received similar reports from multiple units, but instead of investigating, they designated the Red Forest off-limits and ordered soldiers not to discuss sightings. Anyone who kept reporting was reassigned or sent for psychological evaluation. They didn't want to admit something was out there, Mikhail said during interrogation. Bad for morale. Soldiers can handle enemies they understand. Artillery mines enemy soldiers. But something they don't understand? Something that might not even be human? That's a different kind of fear. There's one more account worth sharing, though it's secondhand. In June 2022, a Ukrainian medic named Oksana was treating soldiers who had been evacuated from the Chernobyl region. Many were suffering from radiation sickness, nausea, fatigue, hair loss, the expected symptoms of exposure. But one soldier, a young private she remembers only as Petro, was different. His symptoms were more severe than they should have been given his reported exposure time. His dosimeter logs showed he had been in the zone for only 36 hours, well within safety limits with proper protective equipment. Yet his radiation sickness was progressing as if he'd been exposed to levels 5 or 6 times higher. When Oksana asked him about his time in the zone, Petro became agitated. He insisted he hadn't gone into the contaminated areas. He'd followed all protocols. But then, after some hesitation, he told her what had really happened. On his second night in the zone, he had been on sentry duty. He heard something moving outside the perimeter. Thinking it was an enemy patrol, he went to investigate. He followed the sound into the tree line, just a few meters. That's when he saw it. A tall figure standing among the dead trees. Before he could react, the figure turned and looked at him. He couldn't explain what he felt in that moment. Not fear exactly. More like recognition. Like something ancient looking at something temporary. Like being seen by something that understood you were fragile, mortal, breakable. He ran back to his position. He didn't tell anyone what he'd seen. But that night, his dosimeter's alarm went off. The radiation levels had spiked dramatically. Even though he hadn't moved from his position, it was as if something highly radioactive had passed very close to him. Within hours, he began feeling sick. Within days, he was showing acute radiation syndrome symptoms. He was evacuated and eventually ended up under Oksana's care. He kept saying the same thing over and over. Oksana recalls. It looked at me. It saw me, as if being seen by this thing was worse than the radiation poisoning. He recovered eventually, though he'll have health problems for the rest of his life. I don't think he'll ever recover from whatever he experienced in that forest. Some things leave marks that medicine can't heal. Russian forces occupied the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and surrounding areas for approximately 5 weeks, from late February to early April 2022. During that time, Soldiers lived in conditions that exposed them to significant radiation. Many slept in contaminated buildings, dug trenches in radioactive soil, and handled materials without proper protection. When Russian forces finally withdrew in April, Ukrainian officials who returned to the plant discovered something disturbing. In several buildings, they found notes and graffiti left by Russian soldiers. Most of it was typical military graffiti, names, dates, crude jokes. But in one building near the Red Forest, they found something different. Someone had written in Russian on a concrete wall, "Stay out of the red trees. It lives there." So what are we to make of all this? 7 Ukrainian military reports, multiple civilian sightings, even accounts from Russian soldiers, all describing the same thing. A tall, humanoid entity living in the most radioactive part of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. The scientific explanations don't quite fit. Mutated wildlife doesn't explain the height, thermal properties, or the intelligent behavior. Hallucinations don't explain multiple independent sightings by people with no prior contact with each other, which leaves us with uncomfortable possibilities. Either there's something in the Red Forest that we don't have a scientific framework to explain, or the human mind, when exposed to extreme stress and invisible danger, creates remarkably consistent hallucinations across different cultures and military units. Perhaps what's most disturbing is that we may never know the truth. The area remains contested territory, access is restricted, and both Ukrainian and Russian military leadership seem content to classify these incidents and move on. But the soldiers who were there know what they saw, and they live with the knowledge that in the most poisoned place on Earth, in a forest killed by human error and hubris, something survived, something adapted, something that now watches from the shadows as another generation of humans fights and dies on contaminated ground. The Chernobyl disaster taught us that our mistakes have long-term consequences, that the damage we do to the Earth doesn't simply disappear when we leave. It persists, it changes things, and sometimes it creates things. Maybe the Red Forest Sentinel is one of those things, a consequence of human error, a mutation born from catastrophe, a warning that nature doesn't need our permission to evolve. Or maybe it's something else entirely, something that was always there waiting, and we only noticed it when we finally poisoned the Earth enough to make it visible. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to this episode. The accounts shared today come from multiple sources, including declassified military reports, interviews with soldiers who served in the Chernobyl exclusion zone during the 2022 invasion, and testimony from the intelligence officer we called Dmytro. I want to be clear about something. We can't verify every detail of these accounts. War creates confusion. Fear creates distortion. Memory, especially memory formed under extreme stress, can be unreliable. But what struck me while researching this episode was the consistency of the reports. Different people, different times, different military units, all describing remarkably similar encounters. Whether you believe these accounts are evidence of something genuinely anomalous in the Red Forest, or whether you think they're the result of combat stress and radiation exposure, they represent something important, a window into the psychological reality of soldiers fighting in one of the most contaminated places on Earth. War is terrifying enough without adding the fear of invisible radiation and unexplained phenomena. These soldiers were asked to fight in an environment that actively wants to kill them, not just through enemy action, but through the very air they breathe and ground they stand on. If that creates fear, if that creates visions of something wrong and twisted lurking in the poisoned forest, who can blame them? But I'll leave you with this thought. Chernobyl has taught us that life is more resilient than we expect. Fungi growing on reactor walls, wolves thriving in abandoned villages, nature reclaiming what we destroyed. If life can adapt to radiation in ways we didn't predict, if organisms can evolve to survive in conditions we thought were absolutely lethal, then maybe, just maybe, something in the Red Forest did adapt in ways we don't understand. And maybe that's the most frightening thing of all. Not that we're seeing ghosts or hallucinations, but that we're seeing the future of evolution in a world we've contaminated beyond repair. As always, Thank you to our Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members for making this content possible. If you have your own experiences, military or otherwise, that you'd like to share, you can reach us through our website. May God be with each and every one of you, no matter what you're dealing with. And I'll see you in the next episode.